Hey, time for one of our favorite features of all time. It's Daniel in the Deacon's Den with the amazing Deacon Dan Brahier. And Deacon Dan is on the line with us now. And we're talking about the liturgical calendar and the extension of the Easter celebration. We're still in Easter. We still need to say Happy Easter, right, Deacon Dan?
Good morning, Deacon
Morning,
Dan.
Deacon. So we still say Happy Easter, don't we?
We can. Let's just do it while we can, right?
Yeah, right.
The time is running very short for this this Easter season. You know, it's funny. I was reflecting on how, remember yesterday when it was Ash Wednesday?
Right. Yeah, yesterday.
I mean, isn't it amazing?
Yeah.
It's kind of like, you get all geared up for the beginning of Lent, and you've got this, 40 days of fasting, and all of a sudden you get to Easter and you say, we get 7 weeks of feasting, and then suddenly it's Pentecost, and it's just about time to go back to ordinary time. And the liturgical year just, I don't know, maybe it's an age thing, but it just seems to fly by a lot faster. And I think some of that is if you get really tuned in to the liturgical season. I remember reading one time, I think it was Father Edward Hayes, that said that we can't look at Lent as a time when you are going up the side of a mountain, and when you get to the top of the mountain, you stick a flag in it, and then you come back down and you're done. Instead, it's supposed to be a time that you're escalating up the mountain, and when you get to the top, you stay there. And I think in a way that's kind of what Easter season is like. You stay there over the course of 7 weeks, and if Lent worked for you, and if the Easter season worked for you, you stay at that mountaintop long term. You're not going back down the mountain again. So it's kind of like it's a good time for us, I think, to reflect a little bit just on this whole liturgical season and where we are. I find it really interesting that the Church, in its wisdom, seems to embrace this end of the Easter season almost like it doesn't want to let go of Easter and stop the party. So we go on from, we celebrated the Ascension last Sunday or Thursday, depending on what diocese you're in, and Pentecost this Sunday, and that's formally the end of the Easter season. But while it marks the end of the Easter season, a week later, what do? We dress up in white vestments and altar cloth again, and we celebrate the solemnity of the Most Holy Trinity. And then we go back to green on Monday, and we're back in ordinary time. And a week later, we put the white back on, and we focus on the body and blood of Christ, or Corpus Christi, with processions and feasting, which the Church has been doing for hundreds of years. And I find that really interesting how it's kind of like it is such a liturgically explosive time of the year that, again, the Church just kind of doesn't want to let go. We're just going to keep on celebrating these big events over the next couple of weeks. And I was doing a little bit of research on this, and I found that in the first several centuries of the Church, this I found fascinating. Catholics were actually forbidden from kneeling during Mass in the Easter season. Did you know that?
No.
There's a bet you didn't know that, right?
Yeah.
So during Mass in the Easter season, in all of the places where we will ordinarily kneel, they would stand, because kneeling was considered a symbol of penance, and that's the last thing we want to do in a season of celebration.
Oh, wow.
So they would stand all during the consecration, and other times we normally kneel.
Interesting.
At the same time, the Catholics were not permitted to fast. How about that? You're not permitted to fast from any type of food or drink during the Easter season for that same reason.
Supposed to be feasting, right? Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's exactly right, and that's it. I mean, that's the spirit of why we're supposed to, or can at least have the permission to feast on Sundays even during Lent, right? Because that is considered, it's the day of resurrection. It's the day of feasting, and it breaks the Lenten fast one day every week, which some people do, others don't, but technically it's not part of Lent. So another thing that I found interesting, and this was actually, it popped up in the Office of Readings here in the last couple of weeks, that the Church Fathers wrote about how the entire liturgical year can be condensed into 2 seasons. One is before Easter, and the other is after Easter. And they said that if you think about it, the time before Easter is all about examining our shortcomings, looking at our sin. We focus on the suffering and death of Christ, and then after Easter, we change our focus now to the resurrection, to the glory of God, to our participation in divine life, to the coming of the Holy Spirit. And so they said that although we have Advent and Lent and ordinary time, they argued it's really all about Easter as the centerpiece of our faith. And so because we are a resurrection people. And so if we look at it that way, of course we would expect to do more celebrations in the weeks that follow right after Pentecost Sunday, because we're still in that heavy celebration time, Although it did occur to me, there's sort of this philosophical question of if there really truly are two church years, like when do you switch over from being after Easter to being before Easter? But it's kind of like a circle, But in a way, Trinity Sunday and the Feast of Corpus Christi, the body and blood of Christ, form kind of a soft landing, if you will, for the church when the Easter season concludes. The mysteries of the Trinity and the real presence of Jesus become our focus, especially as we draw a close to this Eucharistic revival. And if you think about it, after all, we just recalled the return of the Son to the Father. That's what we did last Sunday, the Ascension. And then today, this coming Sunday, we will focus on the descent of the Holy Spirit on the apostles at Pentecost. So in a way, it makes sense liturgically, if we've just been focusing on the Son going back to the Father and sending the Spirit, that we would then talk about the Holy Trinity the following week, which is exactly where we're headed. So there's just so much beauty to the church year and the way that it unrolls right now, or kind of rolls along. And of course, in the deacon world, there is a joke about the ordained clergy, through the ordained clergy, that the Holy Trinity Sunday is usually dubbed Deacon Preaching Weekend. Have you heard that?
Oh no! Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Explain the Trinity, would you, Deacon? Yeah.
Well, that's exactly right.
Right.
We talked about in formation. It's almost impossible to preach about the Trinity without falling into heresy.
Right.
So the priests are happy to hand it over to the deacons and say, you know what, you take the hit.
And I'll send you the emails later. Yeah.
Well, that's exactly, yes. I mean, whenever I preach on Trinity Sunday, I'm looking out of the corner of my eye at the pastor thinking, I hope that's not a heresy. I enjoy preaching on those days, but, I figure I'm going to hear about it if I say something wrong.
Absolutely love it.
Well, Deacon, I'll tell you what I love. I mean, you mentioned early on, when we kind of join in the liturgical calendar and follow the church along, everything seems to fall into place so well. I love the way our church sets this up. It brings us along. Well,
yeah, definitely. And even if you look at the individual feast days, that we celebrate along the way, and if you have, a lot of families have traditions of we always do this on the feast of, Saint so-and-so, and it allows us to be able to look with joy at what's coming up in the next week or the next couple of weeks, because there's always some big feast that's coming.
Mm-hmm. Deacon Dan Brahier, ladies and gentlemen, wow.
Ordinary time is anything but ordinary, so we look forward to some talk on that as well. Thank you, Deacon Dan. Have a wonderful day. Thanks for sharing your thoughts today. Appreciate you. God bless you, brother.
Thank you. You too. God bless.